So, I don't think we've ever had a game where we've started in the hanging position. That is brand new. Thanks for joining us. Did you miss the video or did you get to see it? Just a little bit, okay. We'll run it again, okay? Ta-da! We have our MCs from a big thanks to Hillsboro High School and Awesome Nerds. Terry Alexander for putting all of this together as our hosts. I'm Kathy Sweeter, your affiliate partner, if you haven't figured that out. I send the emails. Read my emails, please. Make sure I do send them out. Make sure you're seeing them. Any student, any coach, any mentor can be subscribed to my list. So it just doesn't have to be just the mentor disseminator. You can get all your kids on my list and it'll be fine. That is it. You guys want to take it away? Please welcome your MCs.
Hey guys! Let's go away from there. Let's go over there, how about that? Okay. Ready?
Sure.
Okay. Welcome to the 2018 FTC Rover
Ruckus Challenge. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Welcome to the 2018 First Tech Challenge Rover Ruckus Kickoff event. So we're Team 8371, Awesome Nerds, and we're hosting this in coordination with ORTOP and First. To start off, we're going to have...
So we already started off with the video. That was awesome. Now we're going to have Aaron Curl, an Intel engineer and the FTC Oregon head referee advisor, talk you guys through the field play.
Woohoo! Okay, so I got the super special secret access to the actual game manual part 2, which all of you are probably brought up on your phones by now. But that's a great sign. I know that you guys are going to use the game manual. Oh yeah, and we can hand out the one-pagers. That'll help with anyone who's not too familiar. So I just want to do a quick intro because I love this year's challenge. So I wrote a little thing. Welcome, fellow Voyagers, as we venture into space. Rover Ruckus is here as a new FTC challenge to ace. Deploy from the lander. There's a new world to explore. Claim your depot to prevent any mineral descore. Move minerals from craters into depots and cargo holds. Wait for team ranking to see how your score upholds. Let's document our journeys from today, from the very start. But most important of all, keep gracious professionalism at heart. We're going to have so much fun this year. I really love this challenge, and I love that all of the first programs are doing the space theme. I just want to introduce myself. As they said, I work at Intel. I'm a program manager over there. I've worked there for about 12 years, but I am so tied into this first community here. It is something that I love to do in Oregon. Unfortunately, I never got to do it as a youngster like yourselves, but it's something I always wished for. This is my 10th year actually serving with ORTOP, but also my 8th year in this role. So I just look forward to a great season, and hopefully we can all learn from each other. And then now that we've seen the Rover Ruckus video, I just want to go into a couple things. Before I do this, I have to do the disclaimer, right? All rules shared in my overview or anywhere else that you hear overviews are just summaries of the Rover Ruckus Challenge. It is not a shortcut to reading the forum, and it is not a shortcut to reading the manuals, okay? Everyone's very clear on that. I'm just trying to help you get through what you saw in the video and a little bit more of what's in the manual. As always, the precedence of FTC rules starts with posts in the forum, which is not quite active yet, but you'll see it. And then game manual part 2, then any videos, then any spiels you heard from any event personnel. So the forum, so those of you who are new to FTC or came from FLL even, you might not know what this is. So there's the place where teams can post questions and they get answered by the game design committee directly. Referees and event personnel use that forum to make sure that they're making the best calls at the field and at inspection and even at judging, all that kind of stuff. So please make sure that you not only bookmark Game Manual Part 2 and watch for updates there, but you're also constantly reading the forum throughout the season and posting your questions there, because referees will make the best call they have to the day of the event, but if you really want an official ruling that applies to everyone throughout the rest of the season, it needs to be in black and white on the forum, okay? And then the last part I want to call out is I'm not an inspector, but I depend on my inspectors and the rest of the event personnel a lot. But what we need from you guys is every event you are going to, the night before, the 2 nights before, you walk through that inspection checklist and make sure that you are passing off of everything, right? Because we love to have robots compete on the field, and I would hate for robots to show up and then not have them compete because of an inspection violation. And then everyone saw one of the major inspection things this year is the 42 pounds, that's brand new. So make sure you have a scale in your workshop or wherever you're doing your robot, so that you can measure it every time as well. Okay, let's get on to Rover Ruckus. So we know that 4 teams form 2 alliances, right? And we know that we go from autonomous period to driver control period to endgame. So most of these points you're going to score during this. You're descending from the lander. And I'm going to try and do some of this with the microphone. So if you decide to start on the lander, that's what these brackets are for. Yep. Okay.
We passed these out,
Uh-huh.
and this is the first time we set up the field. We did it very quickly. That's the audience.
Oh, okay. Well, steer. It's fine. This is the field is still set up correctly.
It is.
Yeah.
Orientated.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so as Kathy already pointed out, this might be the first time that FTC has ever started from a hanging position. I will say that we don't want to delay matches waiting for robots to get hung on that lander. So we need to make sure that you guys can do that quickly and efficiently when you step up to the field. So there's no forum posts about this yet, but I expect there will be a couple because this is the first time we're starting out in the hanging position, right? So you've got all the brackets on each of the side, and you could hang 2 robots, right? Because you've got 2 spaces for that to happen. Okay, what else are you doing? Oh, hold on. There. Okay, you're collecting minerals from the crater, which we'll talk about a little bit more specifically. You're sorting and scoring materials into the cargo hold of the lander. You're performing any of the autonomous tasks, and then at the end of the game, you can navigate to special parts of the field for more points. So the minerals, the white balls are the silver, and the gold blocks are the gold, right? And then other things that can come onto the field along with your robot is that team supplied marker. So if you read Field Manual or Game Manual Part 1, you probably already read about the team marker, but that's where all the details of that one are. So if you're in Game Manual Part 2 trying to read about it, you need to go back to Game Manual Part 1 to see the specifications, etc. Okay? Pre-match. So we're going to split up approximately half of the minerals across the 2 craters, and then after all the robots are set up and ready to go, we'll randomize 2 silver and 1 gold per sampling field. So that's what all these little dots on the floor are for. And then you guys are going to start either latched to the lander, which we talked about, and that does actually mean latched and not touching the ground. Or you can be deployed from the lander, which means you're actually within the landing zone, but then you're not able to earn the later lander achievements. So just keep that in mind if you're going to start on the ground, which might be a good place to start for your League Meet 0. But let's try and up the ante as the season goes on. Minerals are not preloaded into the robots, so the only thing you'll have preloaded into the robot if you choose to do so is your team supplied marker. So that's a little bit different than past seasons. We've always kind of preloaded a few game elements, and that's not going to happen this year. And then we talked about the refs will randomly place. We don't know how the random part is happening yet. We'll wait for the referee manual, but it's probably a roll of a dice, and we'll figure that out. Okay, so then the next thing is the autonomous period. So everything is pre-programmed instructions, and as usual, the driver station is placed in a hands-off location where you only push start. So if you're new this year or you didn't see last year, you actually do have to use the built-in Android device 30-second timer to make sure that your program only runs for the 30 seconds. You do not push stop. That's part of your autonomous program, is that it's supposed to stop by itself. If you started on the lander, you could choose to land for 30 points. That's pretty epic. But you have to have started on the lander, which is the hard part. If you claim that your Alliance depot, right, you get 15 points, and that, again, is delivering your marker into the depot. And there's some definitions around that. And then parking each robot in a crater. So it doesn't say completely in yet, or right now it just says in. So if I had to do it today, you just have to be crossing the outside edge of that crater to get those points. And then that one's 10 points, and then sampling. So if you do the sample field, as they discussed on the video, all you have to do is find the gold mineral and get it out of its sampling spot without moving either of the two silver minerals. So that's a little bit challenging because these silver minerals are, of course, the rolling ones. It would have been easier if it was opposite, but it's part of the challenge. And then everybody who'd been here last year, you guys know that we do the autonomous driver-controlled period transition along with the timer. So that actually means that it's going to tell you, drivers, pick up your controllers, and then it's going to go 3, 2, 1, start. So you only have 8 seconds between between autonomous and driver-controlled, and no one is stepping into the field to fix any robots during that time. So make sure you're super familiar with that if you weren't here last season, but as far as I can tell, it's very similar, exactly the same as last season for now. Again, we'll watch the forum. Okay, then driver controlled. We start the 2 minutes, and everybody's using their joysticks to drive their robots. And then, so the main thing here I actually wanted just to find. So the depots are these corners, and it's the volume of the outer edge of the tape extending upward. Right, so that's pretty similar to past definitions, but I'm just letting you know, like, just crossing into a little bit of the tape could help you be there. And the cargo hold is defined by the 5 surfaces. So we have all the sides, the back, and the bottom, right? That's just the definition, and what you're going to do there is score minerals into it. And then minerals that you remove from it are -2 points each. So there's going to be a little bit of live scoring going on there as far as the scoring ref who's standing in your alliance station watching for that. And then, oh sorry, that was in the depot. That's the 2 points and then -2 points if they're D-scored. So the cargo hold, you have gold that gets scored into it for 5 points, silver that's scored into it for 5 points, and then minerals placed into the wrong cargo hold of the lander gets 0 points. What's the wrong cargo hold? Well, assuming we oriented this correctly, they are actually marked, so these ones are supposed to be gold, and then if you can see on this side, this one's supposed to be silver. So each one has a sticker. Yep.
The field set of instructions has it as this. Okay. The one-pager has it incorrect.
Okay, so that's a typical issue we have. So this is actually set up like the field setup instructions. So again, the alliance station for blue would be on this side, the alliance station for red would be on that side. Your picture has the field oriented 90 degrees the wrong direction. So the one pager is a little bit off, but as we said, Game Manual 2 and all other official docs, it's always the one pager that's like crazy low on the list because that's just the summary. Okay, thank you for checking. Yeah, we were all staring at that this morning. It seemed weird. Okay. Now, the end game, again, you can continue to do the driver control period stuff, which is super fun, but the other things you might want to do is latching back onto the lander if you started on the lander. Again, you have to start there to get the 50 points for latching during end game. And then also parked in any crater, so parked in is 15 points, parked completely in is 25 points. So I think that's pretty clear. So the main reason I'm here, because you heard most of those things in the video, but I just want to cover it with the field. The main reason I'm here, though, is to talk about some items you might run into with some penalties. So penalties are the same this year. Their minor penalties are 10 points, major penalties are 40 points, and those penalties actually get added on to the score of the opposing alliance. So that hasn't changed, and if you're not familiar with that, just make sure you read through Game Manual Part 1 again. We still have yellow cards and red cards, and the yellow cards are the warnings, and they're additive, right? So if you get a yellow card, it's actually recorded in the scoring system, and if you get another one, that could turn into a red card, etc. Similar to soccer, and again, not changed from last year's rules as far as the additive and when you get a red card. And then the notification, we're still doing the same way, where the referee will hold up the card in front of your team at the end of the match. So we try and tell you all your warnings and things that are happening during the match, but we don't actually hold up the yellow card until at the end when we're done scoring, to make sure that we can see everything rather than fumble around with the card. And then elimination matches, yellow cards don't carry over from qualification to elimination round, so that's good news for some of you, but we did really well the past 2 years with this new yellow card, red card thing. Oregon did not get that many. So I just want to continue that trend, keep gracious professionalism at heart, and just make sure that you are very familiar with the existing penalties, because if you are constantly breaking one penalty, that could result in a yellow or red card, because then we start to see it as you're not playing the game anymore, you're taking advantage of the penalties. So let's just make sure that everyone is always reading the penalties. I want to go into a few of the game-specific penalties, but I do recommend, and I do this at the beginning in every driver meeting, at every tournament as well, you should always be double-checking at least the penalty summary table in the game manual. And I think that you should double-check it along with when you're reading your inspection checklist. Because what happens is you start to see things with the game and you start to change your strategy. And the penalty you read in September, you forgot about, and then it's November or December or January, and you changed part of your strategy and didn't realize you'd be now violating a penalty. So I kind of see it as read through the inspection table, read through the penalty summary table before every event. Just make sure that you're still on track to be successful at an event. So, some game-specific penalties this year. Again, this is not all the penalties, I just wanted to call out the ones that are very specific to Rover Ruckus. So the autonomous period robot interference. Robots may not interfere with an opposing alliance scoring attempts or sample field during the autonomous period. So you just have to think you should just be doing your own thing. You're not trying to play defense too much. They want autonomous period to be successful for all robots on the field. And there's a couple definitions within that rule, and I'm sure there will be some forum posts. But you also want to be watching out for their sample field, right? Because if you're the one that caused one of the silver balls to roll and you're on the red team and now the blue team doesn't get points, that's a problem, and that's why you'll get a penalty. GS3, control possession limit of minerals. So you saw in the video, you're allowed to possess a maximum of 2 minerals at a time. The only place where that rule doesn't take effect is when you're in the crater. So obviously the crater is a very small space, especially if 1 or 2 robots gets in there. So if you're pushing minerals around in the crater, we don't care so much, but you need to watch out for that definition of control and possession and making sure that you're only doing 2 minerals at a time. Descoring minerals. So once they're in the cargo holds, which again are these things, right? You're not allowed to so you're not allowed to descore or reposition them. Sorry, I keep shaking this. So, and then once they're in the depots, you are allowed to remove minerals from opposing alliance depot as long as it's not considered completely claimed. Again, completely claimed is done by that team marker, and the team marker, both of them have to be in the depot for it to be completely claimed, and that has to occur during autonomous period. So that's a couple special things, making sure that's happening during autonomous if you don't want your minerals descored. And then robots may remove minerals from their own alliance's depot regardless of whether you claimed it or not. I don't know why you would do that. Maybe you did it by accident or you needed more room for something else, but that's there. Okay, blocking access to scoring on the lander. So robots are not blocking access to an opposing alliance's lander or cargo hold or lander support bracket. So that actually means when they're trying to put things inside the cargo hold, again, that's part of the lander, or during the end game when they're trying to actually latch to the landing bracket again, you can't be blocking that. And I think they showed it in a kind of silly way in the video, but we're going to watch for that. We really need to see that that area is kept free so that people can do the scoring. Latching before endgame, this is kind of a similar thing to past things. If you start any of the endgame scoring procedures before endgame, some of them you just wouldn't get points for. So the latching before endgame is one of them. So you're making sure you're not deploying and latching onto that lander support bracket prior to endgame. You're not getting a penalty, but you have no way of resetting it. You get, even if you latched, you get 0. And then latching to the lander, you're only supposed to latch to your alliance-specific support brackets, so don't try and do the opposing one. And the last one, believe it or not, yeah, there's only 9 game-specific rules this year. It's crazy. Launching game elements. So they talked about how robots in the landing zone may place items into the cargo hold, and then robots outside of the Alliance landing zone are still not allowed to launch game elements, right? So again, only 9 game-specific rules. That's the least amount that I've ever seen in my time. But I also know that some of these have some implications that we're going to have to read about on the forum. Do we want to do questions now? Okay. Okay, so I don't have forum answers, and I'm not in the game design committee, but I can tell you what I think based on what I know today, if you guys have any strategy questions. That's my disclaimer. Does anyone have any specific ones? Great question. So he's asking about the latching definition, and it's actually on here. So he's talking about, so a robot is considered latched when it's completely supported by the lander support bracket on the lander and is not in contact with any other game element, robots, or playing field floor. Yes, so it's this little hook on the middle. So you're asking about if you wanted to start it at in-game time. So let's just go to that GS rule, and I think you're gonna have to post some more about this, because that's the one where I was like, oh, they're gonna wanna push the limits on this. So deployed robots are not allowed to intentionally support any portion of their weight with the lander support bracket prior to end game, and then robots that start that are not eligible. So it does say intentionally support. So from my perspective, the ref would have to decide if any part of your robot would be supported in that moment. Sometimes just touching probably is okay, but if it looks like it's even partially supported in that upward, then we have to evaluate. So your job is to make it clear to us that it's not supported, right? Great question. Okay, so I think you're talking about the ones in the sample field. So they're not preloaded, right? Because we're not putting things in preload. So the few minerals that are in the sample field, you talked about if you want to pick it up during autonomous, that is fine on your own side, right? Again, you're not interfering with the opposing alliance mineral field at all. The goal is, again, to find the gold one and at least get it off the target. And if you leave the silver ones, you get the points. But if you want to grab the silver ones to score them and forego the points of the sampling field, that's an option you have. I don't see any limitations to actually grabbing any of them as long as you're not interfering with the opposing alliance sampling. Yeah. Yeah, so pushing the minerals out of the crater. So again, in the crater, I don't care how many you're doing, out of the crater, it needs to be clear that you're not controlling or possessing more than 2. So you're walking that fine line of trying to figure out what's just pushing them out and incidental, and what we consider, oh, you got those out so you can get them easier, and that was a controlled possession situation. So I actually think that every year a controlled possession has a lot of forum posts, and I actually really appreciate it. It helps me evaluate what's going on. But again, in the crater, free game, the moment you come out of that crater, we have to evaluate the controlled possession.
They also define a bunch of words related to controlling and moving and pushing.
Yeah.
Some very careful wording here, so don't
Yeah.
very carefully.
Thank you. The size restrictions, hold on. I don't have the game manual 1 on me. Somebody know the side restrictions? Okay, sorry, I didn't keep it up. I was like, oh, I just need to do the, so he's asking about side restrictions of the markers. So all of that's when is in game manual part 1 in July, but we'll have Kathy double check that one. Again, you want it to be able to fit and still be able to score stuff. So I would imagine you don't want it too big, but we'll have Kathy double check that. Another question? Oh, you have it. Oh, yes. Size constraints. 4 inches by 4 inches, maximum size. 4 inches by 4 inches by 8. And minimum size is 3 by 3 by 4. So this sounds like another thing that constantly needs to be inspected if you're changing it, right? Please inspect and reread penalty summary before every event. Okay. Yes, great question. So when you are latched on, what does the sizing cube have to do with it? So it actually says when you're starting the match, you still have to fit in within the 18-inch sizing cube as far as your latch. So that is a challenge. It does not say anything about that for the end game points. I imagine at that point your robot's partially deployed and there's all this stuff going on, but it just does make sure that you are actually fully latched and not touching any other robot game element oh yeah. Let's start this habit now. We're gonna pass on any questions that coaches might have to team members because we want the teams driving the show, right? But that was a great question. So latched, stay within your 18-inch cube. How are we gonna measure that while you're on the latch? It's gonna be an adventure for all of us. So the only part, so she's asking about boundaries. In the past seasons, we've had boundaries that certain robots, blue robots aren't allowed into red zone, etc. During autonomous for a certain amount of time. We don't have that directly this year. The only one is that you're not allowed to, robots may not interfere with the opposing alliance scoring attempts or sample field during autonomous periods. So it doesn't say you have to stay on your side of the field, but once you're over here, if you're interfering with any scoring attempts or sample field, then we have to call that. So no, it's not explicitly telling you not to go over there, but you run high risk of getting the GS1 penalty called if they happen to need to go where you are, which is hard to tell during autonomous. So that was a great question. There's no 10-second marker on the timer or anything this year. Yes, so initialization, great question. So yeah, as you come up to the field and you're setting up your robot and possibly latching them, you do actually have to have your robot fully initialized so that the only thing you have to do is hit the go button, the little play button, and you have to have that be able to be held for a little bit before or while we, the field refs and field personnel, do the random sample placement. So just keep that in mind. I know we had a little bit of trouble last year too. When you initialize, your initialization needs to hold long enough so we can randomize the rest of the field, right? And then the only thing you should have to do when that timer goes off to start the autonomous period is push play. That's it, okay? Hold on. After you... Oh, perfect. So she's asking about the gold one, right, that you probably moved because you want the points during autonomous, and then can you use the rest of them? As far as I can tell, according to this, is the refs are going to score it at the end of autonomous as fast as possible, and then those minerals are free game. I don't think they have to stay there. It doesn't say anything about it staying there the remainder of the match. We look at the end of autonomous period to see where they are. Again, it could be clarified somewhere, but if I had to do it today, it's at the end of autonomous, what happened, and then after that, it doesn't count towards driver controlled points anyway, so. Yes, so autonomous right now doesn't have points for if you put them in here, but obviously they'll count at the end of driver controlled, so you got a little bit of a one-up of starting that early, but I haven't seen that autonomous will count it. So there's no double counting as far as I can tell this year. Yeah, so I think that's exactly what I was kind of picturing. So he's talking about when you're going to park in the crater, which you might do near the end of autonomous, and you probably, if you're not a latched one, you will probably do at the end of driver control because it's the most points if you're not going to latch. If some of the minerals happen to get kicked out. So again, the moment that they are touched in the crater, I don't actually care the possession limits, right? It's the moment that they leave the crater, do I think that that robot was still possessing and controlling them? So I think if they get kicked out, as long as they're no longer touching your robot, by the time they're leaving the crater, it's probably okay, but let's see what the forum does. But that's how I'd evaluate it today. Okay, which elements will be randomized at the start? So this year we do not randomize any of the pictures. What? Vision targets, thank you, I couldn't think of the special word. So the vision targets are exactly the same at every event you go to. The only things that are randomized are the 2 silver and 1 gold in each of the sampling fields. Was there one over there? I missed it, okay. Can teams what? I haven't read anything about launching team markers, so it doesn't seem like it's against the rules yet, but maybe they'll clarify that. I've just read about launching game elements. Go ahead, green sweatshirt. What are we giving to the other team? Okay, if you're giving a gold or silver to the other alliance, so you can't cause other teams to get penalties directly, right? Yeah, so again, in the autonomous, you're not affecting anyone's samples without getting a penalty, right? During the driver controlled, you are actually allowed to go into the depots and score and descore for them as long as it's not claimed, right? So that's the only limit there. We do know that some more experienced teams realize that they can get higher ranking points if the opposing team gets a slightly higher score but doesn't win, right? If you guys read through all the ranking points parts of the game manual part 1. So we have seen teams actually try and boost the score of another alliance so that the ranking points of their match goes up. And so as far as I can tell, the only place you can really do that is in the depot, and you have to be careful not to descore if they completely claimed it. Good question. Oh. Yeah, so forcing alignments to opponent to break a rule. So I didn't go through the general game ones, but I do want you guys to read through those as well. The general game rules are approximately the same as last year and the previous years, but just make sure you read through each of those. Does it matter where you start where? On the latch, so yeah, that's up for you. So there are 2 latch places, right? And there are 2 robots on your alliance. So you guys work amongst each other to figure out where you want to start. We don't assign you. Is that the question? Okay. So we don't randomize robots. Is that? Yeah, so it's up to the alliance to figure out where they want to start, but you have to work with the other team on your alliance. Oh, so game elements include team markers. That's new. So something you built is now a game element. Excellent. What is that going to do to the rest of the season? That also means if you happen to drop it and you're latched, then it might be touching the robot in a way that I can't count you as latched. So that has implications. Just think through that a little. Yeah, you can't launch it, and if you drop it and you're still touching the robot, I don't know. There's implications. I thought I saw one over here. Yeah, let me do her first. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if you affect the sampling zone of the opposing alliance at all, you're going to get the penalty. I don't have a problem with you continuing to use it because you already got the penalty, and the penalty is actually doing more damage to you than scoring one extra thing. And the scoring of things is only going to count in driver controlled anyway, but you can start it. I'm just going to tell you now that if you continue to do that, then it can turn into now you're purposely breaking the rule, even though we've evaluated it, the penalty on you more than once, and that could turn into a gracious professionalism infraction, which could be a major penalty and possibly a red card. So I'm just saying, like, even if you don't mean to, if your robot keeps going over there and you haven't adjusted something, at some point that becomes on purpose, right? So, okay. Okay. So the creators, he's asking about blocking, and you can't block teams that are trying to score in the card of a hold or latch, right? That's definitely one of the items. He's asking about the creators. So the creators are alliance neutral. You will see that nothing here marks it as red, and nothing there marks it as blue. So right now, they're completely alliance neutral, and I have no reason to see why a red and blue robot can't be in the same crater trying to get the minerals at the same time. Now, if you're coming over here during autonomous, you got to watch out for the sampling field, right? If you're a blue robot coming over towards the one with the red in front of it, but the crater itself on both sides is alliance neutral. Great question. What are we reading? Oh, so preventing opposing alliance robot from accessing an area or alliance-specific game element. So again, craters are not alliance-specific, but it is the kind of thing where you just can't block the full access, right? So it's the same thing as years past too, right? If they're trying to get in one side, sure, you can block it that one side so they have to go around, but you can't do the keep away or anything like that on any zone or element long term. Yeah, so he's asking specifically about the samples. If you knock the gold one off, which I did by accident, and then you knock the silver one off, so clearly you've impacted the silver and you touched the gold, right? So that should mean you don't get the points. I'm assuming you're asking, what if you happen to put the silver one back? Okay, the moment you knock any silver one off, you no longer get the points for sampling. That's how I read the rule. Again, you can post it in the forum, but it seems pretty obvious. Like, you're just supposed to move the gold one. The moment that the silver one is off the tape, you don't get a penalty, but you no longer are eligible for those points. Yes, so she's asking about parking in the crater, and it's a similar definition this year as far as the crater goes. Actually, let's just read the definition together, because I don't want everybody. So it is one of the items. So we all know what parking in versus parking completely in is. So the crater is the area supported by the playing field wall and the outer edge of the crater rim into which the minerals are placed prior to the start of the match. So it is the outer edge, which I think is why in the video for the end of autonomous, they showed it not going all the way up and over. They were trying to demonstrate that they're still parked in the crater as long as they break that plane of the outer edge. I think that's why specifically they did it that way in the video, so you could think about, well, hold on, they weren't completely in. Well, the moment you break the plane of the outer edge and your robot has come to a stop and the autonomous bell has rang, that's when we would check that off and say, yeah, it looks like, but again, your goal is we only have 8 seconds to hurry and score all that stuff, and so you have to still make it obvious that you broke the plane, right? That's your goal. Yeah. Oh no, so the team marker counts as a game element, and then he's asking about the control possession of game elements. So control possession of game elements is specific to minerals. So that's a great question. So you can still be carrying your team marker while you're doing the mineral gathering. Other questions? Oh, I didn't see. Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay, yes. So the marker is not considered a detached part of your robot. I think that's what you're referring to. So we do have a rule that you can't detach things from your robot on purpose, right? Like the video where they had a helicopter lifting a mineral, which is crazy. So the marker you do actually want to deploy into the depot, and you, as far as I can tell right now, there's no rule that says you have to gather it again before you latch during endgame. Again, as far as I can tell right now. Yeah, so that comes back to, so he's asking about emptying the crater so that maybe you wouldn't have to go back into the crater every time. So that comes back to a referee's evaluation of when you've stopped possessing, controlling, hurting, etc., those elements. And I absolutely, that's the first one I thought, they're gonna have to put this one on the forum. So I think that's a great first question to have in the forum, because I understand that not going up into the crater every time would be a strategic value. But I also think their goal is that you are only strategically moving minerals 2 at a time. And so today I would have to say it's up to the refs to decide if it seemed like a possession, hurting, controlling at the moment you were doing it. And we'd probably default to you're getting strategic advantage out of it, right? But I want that one to be on the forum. That's actually one, if I don't see it the first week, I'll post it in my volunteer forum directly. But I do recommend that teams post in the forum as well. The movement regarding what? The depots. Well, the depots are taped on the floor, so what do you mean movement? Okay, so so the depots themselves are not off limits at any point. The descoring from depots becomes off limits if you've completely claimed one for your alliance. So great question. Yeah, so I love the question. So you're asking kind of two questions in one. So he's saying if the blue team's not over here trying to do anything with their cargo hold, can we as the red team come over and do stuff without considering blocking them, right? And blocking is the kind of thing where we have to see another robot is actively trying to access or score in that area. But again, you have to be very careful because the moment that robot comes over there, you got to get out quick, right? So if your robot dies, then we're in real trouble. But the other part is actually robots in the landing zone for their corresponding alliance may launch elements for their corresponding alliance. So if you're sitting in the blue zone launching elements into the red, that's not going to work, right? It does say you have to be in your corresponding alliance landing zone. Can you still play while what? Oh, yeah, so claim only happens during autonomous period, so that's the question. So if you have your team marker and you haven't placed it during autonomous period, there's really no use for you to drop it again unless it helps you gather more stuff or it's strategically another advantage. But yeah, the claimed has to happen during autonomous period. Even if they both end up there during driver controlled, it's not considered claimed. So we are going to have you guys come up and kind of touch the field, etc. But there are latches of this crater wall. So when you say, does the crater wall move, I can't tell you what your robots are going to do this season. I think the goal is that it's staying exactly where it is, but robots do crazy things during the matches. So it does seem pretty solid to me, but you guys can come up and feel it in a few minutes. Okay, so as far as the markers go, there's one part in the game manual part 2 that has been a little bit overlooked. They put the completely claimed phrase in italics, but then they didn't actually put it in the definitions. And so I think that's going to be one of the game manual updates within this first month, because normally when they have something in italics, it means you can go back to definitions and look at what that definition is. I don't think it'll have anything to do with standing. It's just going to be a matter of completely claimed, is it actually completely within the outer edge, etc. We'll have to read about that, but I can't promise you it won't say standing up, but it all depends on how you guys design your markers. Speed limit. I don't think I've ever gotten that question. Inspectors? So, speed limit. So I would just say, from my experience, the risk with speed in a 12 by 12 foot field with an 18 by 18 inch robot can cause problems, but it's not something that we necessarily inspect for. I would just say the risk with speed is sometimes you are ramming into things that you probably shouldn't be ramming into if you're going at full speed, which could include other robots or this lander, which is pretty tough, but not not going to take all the beatings. So I would just say that's the only thing that refs would watch for. If you're going at full speed and you happen to hit something, do we consider that a damage, possible tipping scenario? But as long as you're able to practice and be control of that driver and latch down at one point, yeah, it's never been an inspection. I just say that the teams that do go full speed also have a way to power down their motors so they can slow down as they're going close to something that is delicate or they're near other robots, right? I actually do recommend that, especially for rookie teams. Make sure you know how to not go at full speed, because it'll actually help you with your driving and your steering to slow it down. So, oh, yeah. Completely custom made, or so for the marker, does it have to be completely custom made, or can you use parts from previous FTC seasons? I don't see a limitation on that as long as you meet the size. And go into the game manual part 1. There's a whole new section about the marker. Not quite. You'd have to do a little bit of work, but that was actually one of Kathy's first thoughts, right? We were wondering if they would use a relic as one of their markers. Oh, she wanted a relic to morph into an astronaut. I read that as maybe it could be your marker too, but I don't know the size limits, etc. Okay. Yes, so let's actually read landed together because that's one of my favorite definitions as well. So she's asking about during autonomous when you deploy to your landing zone, right, if you were already latched. Oh, hold on, they don't have the landed thing. So landed, from my first experience, is you're no longer even partially latched, right? So you're becoming unlatched. So the partially latched part, again, goes back to if there's a part of your robot that meets the, is not, sorry, go back to. If a part of your robot is still partially supported by the latch on the side, then it's probably not landed. And again, we have to be able to evaluate that quickly. So for me, it's more obvious if you let go completely. But if for some reason you didn't let go, we're gonna have to default to the forum a little bit, but my goal is to see that nothing is supported by that latch anymore. So let's go up here. I think we have like 2 more. So there is a clearance option for latched. I think it was a couple, well, no, sorry, for latched they actually say that you just have to be off the playing field, but because you have to be off, and again, I don't know how you guys are all gonna do this, you have to be off and within your 18 inches for the first latch, right? So from my perspective, you still would have to be off the ground at least by a couple inches to keep your whole robot within the 18 inches, but for the second latch, there's not a specification yet on how far off the ground. It just needs to be something the refs can determine. Oh, this is in the field setup manual, or you can measure it later down here. I don't have it memorized. Good question though. The clearance between the 2 is something you'll need to know for sure. Okay, let's wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Erin. Yay. I think that with all of your questions, it goes without saying that before that this is a science, technology, engineering, and math program, it is a literacy program. You must yourselves not just depend on what Erin may have said today, because this is our very first look at this. You have to read the game manual. You've got to connect the dots in the game manual between all the various rules and how they may interact with each other, and you've got to read the forum. You have to select. I look at our First Tech Challenge teams, and with the space theme, and I'm a huge sci-fi fan, is that you're building like the crew on a Star Trek ship. You have someone that's doing the designing the chassis, and you've got your engineer and your programmer. You've got someone looking at an engineering notebook. You have someone that's going to be your rule czar that is looking at all those aspects. So you're going to assign various tasks among your team so that you can be that the sum of all of you is greater than just the individuals. And so that, think about this as that your very own Star Trek engineering team and small little startup.